one of his great statements you hear in the religion is of whom? Of the mother of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala. And when he was 7 years of age, the mother of Imam Malik, she ties the turban upon Imam Malik's head and she sends him to his teacher, whose name is Ibn Hurmuz. And she says to Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, ta'allam min hilmihi. Hilm here. قبل أن تتعلم من علمه. Take from his hilm before you take from his ilm. Because hilm ultimately is going to be synonymous for your adab, your khuluq is always going to be found in ilm. It's like the insignia of prophecy. And it's so important that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala infuses it from the horizontal realm. Hilm in the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Halim comes to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ibn al-Halima. It comes through Halima Sa'idiyya, the Hilm of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But likewise also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the last shaq. So important, it comes vertically. In the last shaq, it descends with Gabriel and Mikael when the Prophet was prior to the Prophet ascending to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what that shows you that the ascent, the final ascent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not occur for any man save that they have to be Halim. They have to have this quality. The most important time. And that's why one of the Imams who went and spent 20 years with Imam Malik. And in riwayat, different riwayat, but in one riwayat, he said, I spent 20 years with Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, 18 of those years I spent taking from his knowledge. 2 years of those I spent taken from his hilm, from his adab, the khuluq of Imam Malik. He said, I wish that I'd spent the entire 20 taken from his adab. He says, because the ilm Malik, tajid inda Malik wa inda ghayr Malik. He said, because the knowledge of Malik, you'll find it with Malik, but you'll find it with other than Malik. Knowledge, knowledge, how Allah Ta'ala yuqassim. But the adab of Malik, you only find it with Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala. I wish I'd spent the entire 20 years just taking on the adab of the great Imam of Dar al-Hijrah, rahimahullah ta'ala. Okay? Hakata with the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because if you take from his character sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, khlas, it's like the vortex which sends you both ways. At the point you take from the character, the hilqiyah, it will send you towards intellect and it will also send you towards desire. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Al-Hilm, radiallahu ta'ala anhu warda, he brings a really important issue of health. Especially in the day in which we're in. When we're the object of harm. The ummah of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We're the object of harm. The object of the harm doesn't render us victims. Neither should the object of harm render us victors, because the victor is Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala is the Nasir. Save, we could be the Mansurun. That's the Hizb of Allah Ta'ala. The party of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one in whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifests His Nusra subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there are prerequisites for that. And that's sort of what you're learning here, the prerequisites. And who does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifest His victory amongst? These are the people who imitate Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is Ghadan, as Sayyidina Bilal said, Alqa muhibba. I will meet my beloved. Muhammadan wa hizba. Muhammad and his people, the hizb of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allah, Hizbullah. That's the hizb of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hizbullah. It's hizb Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. What you're reading are prerequisites for it. Okay, in our day and age, it's an issue of what? Of power politics. And many of us, how we live, how we speak, how we carry ourselves inside of our mortal life, ultimately is tantamount to our relationship with power. Okay, whether we're people who perceive that we're powerful or whether we're people who perceive that we're powerless. But power, lillah, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for Him alone subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so true power politics is what is your relationship with Him. وَتَتَلَاشَ الْكَوْنِ. And the kawn is insignificant, has no bearing whatsoever. The day you die, you're not raised in front of the kawn. You're not raised in front of creation. You're not answerable to creation. You are answerable to God, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Listen, man.
Forbearance, Hilm, is a state of dignified bearing and constancy despite provocation. Long suffering, ihtimal.
Because he says, Al-Hilm, because he's given definition. Hilm, once again, definition of Qadi Iyad,
is a state of dignified bearing and constancy despite provocation.
And what does that mean by Hilm? He's telling you like the state of Hilm, the state that Hilm produces. And what he means by Hilm, the Halim is not affected by his environment. That's the Halim. Okay? The power politics of the Kawn doesn't affect him. لا يحركه صاحب الثبات. He's just somebody who's fair, mashallah, tabarakallah. Okay? It's like Paulo Freire, mashallah, Paulo Freire, he said that the nature of man, the true khilaf, the true reality of the human being, is that his environment never affects him. He said, if your environment affects you, then you're like an animal. He said, animals are shaped by their environment. Human beings shape their environment. Sawab. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. About Paulo Freire, the great sort of South American sociologist and thinker. MashaAllah. That is a statement. That's deen bi'aynihi. And there he's speaking about one of the realities of Hilm. The Halim, khalas. La yastafizzuhu al-ghadab. Nothing affects him. Nothing enrages him. Nobody angers him. Always in his stride. Why? Awamiruhu min fawq. His affair and his commandments, the dictates min fawq, from above. Okay, they don't come from the horizontal realm whatsoever. And that is something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. Like a similar trait, like tu'ada, ta'anni, the different traits were similar to it in this part that Imam Qadi Iyad Hilm is comprehensive. Imam Qadi Iyad is defining Hilm from a perspective. Allahu Alam, it's not a complete definition, but it's from a perspective. The perspective is here, his environment never touches him, never ruffles him. His environment doesn't shape him whatsoever. He is non-reactionary. Okay? He doesn't react. He acts. Farq. Big difference. Okay? Radiallahu ta'ala anhu. You see that in a shaj. Right? This is beloved to Allah. That's like a shaj. When a shaj comes, Waft Abdul Qais, when he comes to the Prophet ﷺ, amongst Ahl-Bahrain, the people of Bahrain, in the 9th year after Hijrah, when you come to the Rasul ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ showing you realities, the whole content of the Hadith is important. It's showing you reality that min Allah, this is reality that Allah Ta'ala unveils or instills inside the human being. Because the first thing the Prophet shows the companions, now the greatest riders ever are going to approach. He's in his message, the greatest riders ever are about to approach. And so Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab yaqum, he stands, and then Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab goes beyond the mosque into the desert. Who's the Rasul speaking about? But the Rasul speaking from the midst of the mosque. And now they're about what so and so on phoned him upon his jawal, upon his phone. That's kashf of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's not just like the 360 peripheral vision. Like he sees only that which can be seen. But once you have physical barriers, then it's blocked. The vision of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam ila ayn. Ila ayn yourself. Like where does it? Qadi Iyad dealt with it. It's khalq. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet gazing, seeing that which cannot be seen with the naked eye. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Umar ibn Khattab sees them approach. There they come, Waft Abdul Qais. And Umar ibn Khattab stops them in the midst of the desert and informs them of what the Prophet ﷺ has just said. Hadith in Al-Bukhari. And thereby as he's speaking to them, you see the Prophet himself emerge out of the mosque, emerge into the desert with his companions. Waft Abdul Qais see the Rasul ﷺ, they begin to jump off their beasts. Now this is ta'adhim. They all want to venerate the Rasul. Now what's ta'adhim? Ta'adhim is an inward quality. Veneration, esteem, that's inward. But how does it translate in terms of deen? So they're going to translate it in different ways upon different degrees. So some of them, they're going to translate it that to venerate the Rasul is the first one to get to him. The closest, the first one with him, that's the greatest way you esteem the Rasul. So there they go, they start running towards the Prophet ﷺ. Others, you don't approach the Rasul ﷺ running. Like you don't approach prayer running. Best way is to walk. So they're walking towards the Prophet. That's like tawakkul. Yeah. Tawakkul, waqar is when you just gather like that. You're walking. That's the best way to venerate. The others, the best way, like to go as if into a state of ubudiyah. Like we heard yesterday, Sayyidina Yahya ibn Zakaria and Isa ibn Maryam and Jesus. Yasjud lahu. That John the Baptist prostrated to Jesus when they were in their mother's wombs. So some get down. And they're crawling towards the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's how they translate veneration. Then there's one man in all of that commotion. What does he do? He simply alights his beast. He goes into his beast, takes out some nice clothes. He's taken off his clothes, he's getting dressed, fixing himself properly. Then he begins to proceed to walk to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What's the point here? Tawaqqur wa thabat. He is not influenced by his environment. See, as human beings, we entrain. It's the flow of Allah Ta'ala's universe. It is very difficult for us to separate ourselves from the waves, from what other human beings are doing. I get the point? You understand? If I start to laugh now, I'm sure you'll give me a laugh. If I started to cry now, I'm sure there'll be tears dropping. If I start to yawn even, it's all going to be yawn. We entrain. But that means we're influenced by environment. get the point? I mean, the dictates are coming from other human beings. They're not coming from folk. So that's one of the things you have to fight. It comes natural to the human beings. But husn al-khuluq as a rule, la. Husn al-khuluq is something that you must unearth. I mean, it needs mujahada, it needs struggle for you to unearth your reality. So, a Shaj ain't influenced by nobody. And he just proceeds to the Rasul, the only one. It shows you it's a rarity. And then the Prophet he said, you have two qualities that Allah and His Messenger love. That's the Shahid. Allah and His Messenger love. All of them return back to this. He's not influenced by his environment. The tributaries of Hilm. But his question is, well, Tayyib, yeah, Allah Ta'ala and His Messenger loves it. But I want something even higher than that. You say, I want to know, yeah, is it bil iqtisab? Qadi Iyad discussed in the last chapter before last. Is it something that I got from my environment, bil iqtisab, through attainment, or jubiltu alayhi, or is something that becomes natural to me? Well, if you got it from they don't get the point. It's negating your environment, so you couldn't have got it from your environment. The whole thing is how you are aloof from your environment. So how could you have got it from your environment? The Prophet said, jubiltu alayhi, it is something that is natural to you. It's not environmental. And then he said, all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who instilled two natural qualities in me that are beloved to Allah and His Messenger. That's it. I've got something that they love, that they see inside of me, that is worthy of love. Okay? So, Hilm, very, very important. But obviously, the greatest sign of Hilm, of the Halim, is that, not that he recompenses wrong with good, because in reality it's not a recompense. Do you get the point? Because they say the Halim, if you do bad to the Halim will do good to you. That's the Halim. You don't get the point? You understand that? But it's not reactionary. Because if it was recompense, he is doing good to you because you did bad to him. And that means he's influenced by you. That's not the case. You do bad to him, yandur folk. He gazes above. What does Allah Ta'ala want me to do in this situation? So he's not reactionary. He's not a reactor, but he's an actor on behalf of the Divine Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Understand the farq, the difference? That's the importance of learning the law. Importance of learning muqtada al-hal. What does Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala want from you inside of the moment? Subhanahu wa Ta'ala.